Hey friends, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing the final video in my 2023 wrap-up series, and that is my almost favorites. If you have not seen the other videos in that series, I'm going to link that playlist up in the cards and down in the description box. But essentially, I had way too many 5-star books in 2023. Could not possibly fit them all into a single favorites video, so I decided to make a second one called my almost favorites. So I have 14 books on this list. These are the remaining books that I really still wanted to talk about. I think they deserve a whole ton of love. I absolutely adored these books. They just didn't quite make it onto that initial list. This video, unlike those other ones, is not ordered in any way. We're just going to go through these one at a time in no particular order. The first one is Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. First of all, I found this copy at my local Barnes & Noble and squealed out loud when I saw it, but this is a really short contemporary romance where we're following this heroine whose sister is a bridezilla. She is at her wit's end with her sister, and she has to go to the wedding destination. It's in Mexico, and so they have to go a week ahead of time. I think it's about a week ahead of time to do all of these other wedding events, and the heroine is just stressed out. For whatever reason, her sister is like on her about everything. And everyone is making her feel very uncomfortable because her sister's fiance is her ex-boyfriend. She has no lingering feelings for this ex. She's happy for her sister, but everyone thinks that it's this big, devastating thing, and she is just tired. And the best man is her ex's best friend, and he has always had feelings for the heroine. When they are spending this week together, the chemistry is very apparent, and they decide to have a wedding fling, and he just showers her in affection. I talk about this every time I talk about this book, but there is a scene in this book where she is so exhausted and he's like, what do you need? And she's like, I just need some time alone to read my book, like at the water. And dude goes and rents her a yacht for the day so that she can go out and just be alone and read her book. And we all need that guy. Next is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. I just talked about this author in my 5-star predictions, I believe. This one was a really, really angsty, dramatic contemporary romance following these two exes. One is a florist and the other is a wedding planner. And they have avoided each other since their breakup, and now they are forced to work together for this wedding. The chemistry is still very intense. Part of what I loved so much about this book is, one, it is super dramatic, which is why I know a lot of people didn't get on board with it. It is very angsty and dramatic and over the top, but I was here for it. But what I thought was so well done in this book is how you get both POVs, but in opposite directions. So you're getting from the hero's POV, you're getting the start of their romance as it gets closer to present day. And from her POV, you're starting in present day. You start off the book by being really sympathetic towards the heroine and being kind of angry at the hero. And as you learn more about their romance, you kind of switch sides. And I thought it was fantastically done. Then we have New Adult by Timothy Janofsky. I did vlog my experience reading this book, so I will have that linked in all of the places. But this is just a really sweet, charming adult romance that feels like a mashup of A Christmas Carol and 13 Going on 30. We're following this guy who lives in New York. He dreams of becoming a stand-up comedian, a really famous stand-up comedian, and he is very flighty and tends to pick his career over everything else, and everyone kind of feels like an afterthought sometimes and taken advantage of. It all comes to a head when he runs out on his sister's wedding to perform a gig. And when everybody finds out, they get very upset, and he makes a wish as he falls asleep to wake up and be a famous comedian and prove everyone wrong. And when he wakes up, it is 7 years or something in the future, and he is now a famous stand-up comedian, but he has nobody. His best friend, roommate, and longtime crush doesn't speak to him. His family doesn't speak to him, and he's completely alone. And he is trying to figure out what happened in the years that he missed and how to go back and fix it. It's a really, really sweet romance. Both of the main characters have friend-zoned each other because they have been terrified to take the next step, but they are both pining heroes and just love each other, and it was really stinking cute. Number 4 is a book that I don't think I've talked about since reading it, and part of the reason is because I don't think that this book needs me to talk about it. It's Happy Place by Emily Henry. I feel like Emily Henry books are already so hyped that I just never put her books into any videos. I feel like everybody already knows. It's like wrecking Sarah J. Maas for fantasy romance. Like, we already know. But I do love Emily Henry books. I love her humor. I love her characters. I love how messy everybody is. And this one is a second chance romance. We are following this couple who has broken up, but their friends don't know they've broken up. And when they return to their like friend's cabin, my cat is attacking one of my bags right now. They decide that they are going to pretend like they are still together in order to keep their friends happy for this long weekend. And as they are faking, they are confronting what tore them apart the first time and seeing if they can find their way back together. Like I said, I think her humor is great. I think her characters are great. I cry in every single one of her books. I cried in this one. Even though it says Happy Place on it, I sobbed. Next, The Secret Service of Teen Treason by India Holton was the third and final book in the Wisteria Society series. I know that this series is not for everybody, but I personally found this to be absolutely hilarious and completely charming. I think it's such a unique historical fantasy romance mashup where these Victorian women found this spell and can fly, and some of them fly houses, some of them fly themselves, and they hold on to all of the silly Victorian manners, but they're also really sassy. This one is following a maid and a butler, and they are spies trying to infiltrate and learn some stuff about the pirates, and they have a like fake marriage in order to blend in, and it was so fantastic. We have a neurodiverse hero, and the two of them are so blunt and straightforward, and they're not really good at reading into like body language and facial expressions, and so their humor is so dry and absolutely hilarious. My favorite part of this entire book is how intensely the hero falls for the heroine and is undone by potentially losing her at the end of this book. And when he shows up to ask for help in getting her back, I cried. In case you can't tell, if a book ends up on this list, it's usually because they made me cry. I don't know if I need to say that for all the books, but usually that's why they're here. Number 6 is Something Spectacular by Alexis Hall. This was the sequel to Something Fabulous. I thought Something Fabulous was fine, but it wasn't my favorite. I thought this book, though, was exceptional. I loved these characters, and there is always something so special about the way that Alexis Hall discusses gender in their books, and this one definitely did that. We're following this heroine who has been in love with her best friend forever, and she knows that that relationship is very toxic and she needs to find a way out of it, but she is having a hard time getting over it. And when that best friend calls her for help, she rushes to her side and ends up meeting our other main character, who is an opera singer. And the two of them form this kind of odd relationship where they are both very attracted to each other, but know that they can't or shouldn't be together because one of them is hung up on somebody else and the other one is a traveling artist. And they don't really think that there's a way to make a romance between them work. As they get to know each other and move throughout this plot, they fall for each other anyways. There's always something special about Alexis Hall books. Same thing with If Only You by Chloe Leese. Chloe Leese books, especially the Bergman Brothers series, are all 5 stars. I loved this one. This one is following the youngest sibling, and because she's the youngest sibling, she is really struggling to get her family to acknowledge that she is a grown adult, and she strikes up this deal with one of her brother's teammates who is like the bad boy. He is going to help her dirty up her image, and she is going to help him clean up his, and they form a friends to lovers romance. And I think what was so fantastic about this book was that the hero falls so hard for the heroine that he doesn't want to change for her. He wants to change for himself to prove that he is worthy of her. Just amazing. Number 8 is Plie by A.H. Cunningham. This cover is absolutely everything, which is what got me to read this book in the first place, because this is my favorite cover of 2023. But I thought that this was so well done. One of my favorite things about A.H. Cunningham books are how queer they are. Even in a MF pairing, they are like, all of the characters are still hella queer. This one is a series that's going to be following these 3 best friends. This first book is following a heroine who is an ex-ballerina, and she has since opened up a studio where she trains ballet. She works with her 2 best friends, and she is having a really, really intense, like, antagonistic to lovers, enemies to lovers, forbidden age gap romance with one of her students' fathers. He is such a jerk to her at the beginning of the book, and he has his reasons for why he is so grumpy towards her and so antagonistic. They end up meeting outside of the studio because he is learning and training to be a dom, and she is a sub. And so they get paired up together anonymously to work together so that he can, like, work on some different techniques. And despite them wearing a mask, they quickly realize who the other person is, and that sexual tension starts to bleed into their everyday life. This does deal heavily with addiction and dealing with a loved one with addiction. Do know that going in, but I think all of it was done so well. This book is really, really sexy as well, in case you couldn't tell by the cover. Number 9 is How to Say I Do by Tal Bauer, which is the one and only Tal Bauer book that didn't make me cry. So if you are looking for a Tal Bauer book that is not going to destroy you, this is it. But this is a really fun vacation romance. We're following these 2 guys who meet at an airport in a very uncomfortable situation because one guy is at the airport bar getting completely wasted because he was just stood up on his wedding day, and he and his wife were supposed to be heading to their honeymoon, and now he's going there by himself. Our other hero ends up stepping in because he's a hot mess, and the 2 of them are going to the same place, and so they fly together. When they land, I think it's in Mexico if I'm remembering correctly, they go to the destination together, and when they get there, management thinks that they just got married, and so they end up pretending that they're married. The rescuing hero is actually there for, I think, his sister's wedding, and so it all kind of becomes a bigger deal once his family arrives. But they do all of this really romantic stuff down in Mexico because they're there for this honeymoon, and watching these 2 fall in love was so great. But one of the things I think that this book did exceptionally well with this concept was only the first, I would say, like, half of the book is at vacation, and the second half-ish, maybe a little bit more, is actually afterwards, and them trying to figure out if it's even possible for them to make this vacation romance into more, because they live very far apart. One lives in New York City, the other one lives in Texas, and they lead very different lives. And it is them finding their way back towards each other. This is what Tal Bauer says is the closest that he will get to a rom-com. It's definitely not a rom-com. There are some heavy themes in here, but it is not soul-destroying. Number 10 is the first of the novellas. I did want to include 2 novellas on here. They tend to not make it onto my favorites because it's hard to compare a novella to a full-length book. So I wanted to make sure that I included 2 novellas on here. So one of my favorite novellas of last year was Treble by Rilsey Adams. I frickin' adore Rilsey Adams. I think I've given every single novella of hers 5 stars. I just think she does novellas exceptionally well. I don't know if there is another author who writes novellas that I love as much as Rilsey Adams consistently. This one is a really great polyamorous romance following this married couple who have an open marriage. The communication in this book is everything. Everything. This couple does not hide anything. They are very open with each other. They talk about their dates and partners and all of that. And at the beginning of this book, the hero meets a new woman, but she has been burned in the past by getting involved in a romance with a guy who said he was in an open marriage and wasn't. And so she insists that in order for them to go on this date, she needs to meet his wife to be certain that this is a legitimate thing. When they all meet for dinner, there is an immediate connection between all of them. And for the first time ever, this married couple dates the same woman, and it is so good. It is so good. First of all, the steamy scenes in a Rilsey Adams book are unparalleled. And two, there is a scene in here where they care for her because she has really, really bad PMS. The caretaking, it was so good. This is just another one of my favorite novellas by her. Next is The Key to My Heart by Leah Lewis. This is probably the author that I personally feel like is the most underrated contemporary author. Leah Lewis writes really heartbreaking contemporaries that do have romances in them, pretty like substantial romances as well. It's not really a like side plot or anything like that. It really is one of the driving factors, but I always consider them contemporary because the main focus of her books is usually the growth of the heroine. In this one, we're following this heroine who lost her husband 2-3 years ago in a like freak accident, and she does not know how to move on. Everybody in her life wants her to go back to normal, and she is trying to make them understand that she is a different person. Like, she is completely changed by this situation, and she is really struggling to figure out how to move on with her life without feeling like she's betraying her past. And she starts finding music at a piano, like a public piano where she plays. And all of the sheet music that is being left for her are songs that were important to her and her husband. And she feels like this is some sort of sign. And it leads her down this path to a therapy group and meeting this guy and forming some new friendships. And along the way, she is figuring out what the next steps in her life are. It has a really great romance. It has some really great friendships in it. This is another one of those books that not only discusses a lot of romantic love, but familial and platonic love as well. And it was wonderful. It is a very sad book, so do know that there's a lot of loss in here as well as addiction. So do know that, but it is definitely worth it if it is content that you can handle. Number 12 was a bit of a surprise. It was The Long Game by Elena Armas. This is an author that I never had any interest in, but this was a soccer romance. Not only is that like a buzzword for me, but there's cats and goats on the cover. And so I had to pick it up. And I gave it 5 stars. I was really shocked by how much I love this. This is a grumpy sunshine, enemies to lovers romance, forced proximity. Our heroine's father sucks, and she is like sent away after this PR nightmare, and instead of the team like defending her, they all kind of turn their back on her, and now she is stuck in this like rural community working with an ex-soccer player who left the league very suddenly, and they have to coach a girls' soccer team. This girls' soccer team is completely ridiculous. These girls are so funny, and I'm not a big fan of kids in romances. The kids in here, though, were really, really adorable and really hilarious. There wasn't too much of them, and they did have a role in the plot, which I did appreciate. This does have a scene in it, which is the most sexually intense yoga scene that I have ever experienced, and it was wonderful. And then the other novella is Fans Only by B. Love. This novella was fantastic. I read this for a Do My Friends Have Good Taste vlog. This was my first book by this author. It's definitely not going to be my last, but this is about these 2 friends who start an OnlyFans channel in order to raise money for them to like go after their dreams. I want to say the hero is trying to open up a music studio, and I believe the heroine is trying to enter into a program, fashion program. I can't entirely remember. After a discussion with their friend group, they realize, why not start an OnlyFans account? And so they do. And obviously, they can't control their feelings. It was great. I love how steamy this book is. And while the sex scenes are fantastic, I did really love how they didn't overtake the rest of the story. The characters in here are fantastic. They are really well developed and relatable, even though you probably haven't lived in this situation. And the progression of their romance was just so well done. Again, every time an author can pull off a really, really strong romance in a novella format, I'm blown away. This was great. And then the last book on this list was one of the last 5-star books of 2023, and that was The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. This I've talked about a couple of times, but the fact that this cover is on this book makes me legitimately mad. This cover does not match the insides at all. This is actually a Omegaverse shifter romance. This is really steamy, and I say that as somebody who reads a lot of like indie romances. She really went there with this one, and it's one of the reasons why she is on my most anticipated of the year, despite these really bland, boring covers. What got me with this one is, one, it is a very self-aware book. It does not try to take itself too seriously. It leans into the overdramatic sort of plot that it has, and I loved it for that. We are following an alpha and an omega who have both been hiding their identity, and they agree to fake date and are slowly realizing their mistake. The amount of sexual tension and erogenous hugging that happens in this book, who knew that hugging could be so hot? Not me, but apparently Lana Ferguson did. So those are my almost favorites of 2023. Like I said, there were other 5-star books that I read in 2023, but I would have to do like 2 more videos to talk about all of them because I read a lot of really good books in 2023. So that's going to be it for my end of the year wrap up. There are going to be some other reflection videos, but they're not going to be 2023 specific. Let me know if you read and loved any of these, and the remainder of my 2023 wrap up videos will be linked down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.